Campus to Canton. Campus to Canton on the Better Sports Network.
Good morning, everybody. Week 10 of the college football season. For you fantasy folks, it means the playoffs are just around the corner. And for those maybe looking to play some bets today, we've got you covered there too. Felix Sharp, Nick Allen, Chris Moxley, Matt Bruening, and of course myself, Austin Nace from Campus to Canton here. We got Anthony in the back helping us out. Barnabas will be checking in later. Gentlemen, we've got the whole Devy debate crew plus Nick this week. This is going to be Nick. You're going to say 10 words this whole show. Just so you're aware. I'm sorry right off the bat.
Quite all right.
Chris, who you repping on the hockey jersey there this morning?
I only rep New Jersey. I like Carolina too because I live in Raleigh and the stadium's next to me. But go Devils always. I'm wearing Jack Hughes today actually because he got hurt last night, so it's like a kind of in memoriam.
Okay, we should get in the arms of an angel or something playing here for you in a little bit. All right, we've already actually had some crazy stuff happening this week in college football, and I think we're not going to talk Michigan. We've talked that on the show. Whatever. We'll figure that out at a later date.
Stallions. I got to get a Stallions jersey. You know that those are going to be walking around next year.
Oh, 100%.
Stallions Michigan jerseys. Yeah.
I'm sure Michigan probably won't let you put that on the back if you.
I know you got to go to like some offshore site to get that jersey, but they will be around. The big house next year.
If they win a national championship, does he get a ring?
Yes,
he's
he
part
does.
Of the coaching
secretly.
Staff, so
they give it. They do get hit to him somehow. Absolutely.
Yeah, they 100% will. But no, I'm actually talking about some up and down type things going on in Colorado right now. Dion obviously made a little bit of a fuss about the offensive line last week. We thought maybe that was the end of it. Turns out it's not. Colorado making a change at offensive coordinator this week, demoting, essentially firing offensive coordinator Sean Lewis, who quit his head coach job to come work there for Dion, bringing in Pat Shurmur to take his duties away from him. Felix, what do you think about this? We don't see this kind of shifting of the management very often.
Well, not when management is doing well, and it feels really, really messy. I mean, the Sean Lewis. First of all, from a fantasy perspective, everybody in this group was familiar with Sean Lewis because his offenses put up points. So when Deion Sanders, hired him as out of Kent State as to be his offensive coordinator, we're like, okay, that's a really decent hire. And then they actually put up points on the field, given, the personnel that he was allowed to operate with. Do they run the ball well? No, they don't have a good offensive line. Do they protect Shedeur Sanders well all the time? No, but still, I mean, Shedeur Sanders is in the Heisman race largely because, or at least from our opinion, what Sean Lewis is doing with that team offensively. So he gets demoted. We don't really understand why. Nobody respects Pat Shurmur in his world the way that people respect Sean Lewis in the college football world. So it obviously doesn't make sense. It feels nothing has felt as messy as this. I mean, you've had some of the incidents on the field with pregame fights and Shedeur being flashy and all of that stuff, and kind of the way that they've lost and Dion throwing players under the bus. But nothing has felt like disorganization quite like this. And, Sean Lewis is going to have a lot of options come this offseason if he wants to. Hey, Alabama needs an offensive coordinator. They can replace somebody. Michigan State needs a head coach. He just coached in the Midwest. Sean Lewis could go there. I mean, there are a number of places that are going to be picking up the phone to call this guy and say, hey, do you want to come over here? And I kind of thought that was a possibility when Sean Lewis went there in the first place. I didn't think that it would be after year one, especially after the success that they've had offensively. But, it could be. It could be after year one that he makes the jump.
Chris, there's some rumors that that's actually exactly what was happening, and that's why this move took place. Do you buy that? And do you think this is a, kind of loyalty test from Dion, kind of saying, anybody else who does this gets the same treatment?
Yeah, I kind of buy that. I'm sure he was interviewing or like back channel interviewing, and it got back to Dion somehow. Sean Lewis didn't get fired at Kent State. He left Kent State on his own accord to take this Colorado offensive coordinator job. He was head coach at a MAC program. Now, I don't think that he was doing everything from a program running perspective that was excellent, but he can call plays, period. And I think that there were potentially people reaching out to him saying, "Hey, we want you to come here next year. What do you think?" And yeah, I think he made himself a little bit available. It's like when you turn on your LinkedIn, it's like open to job opportunities, even when you're employed by somebody, but your employer can't see it. It's kind of like that.
Nick,
Can we do that for Twitter to say we can go to another fantasy company? Is there a way to do that? I'm just, not that I would do it. I'm just
curious. Just curious. Nick, you do weekly projections for all 133 teams, plus just some sicko FCS stuff. How is this changing how you're looking at this Colorado offense, specifically for folks who have been leaning on Shedeur and Xavier Weaver and Jimmy Horn and Travis Hunter and all these guys, Michael Harrison, for the past 9 weeks of their seasons?
Well, numbers wise, it happened so late in the week that honestly haven't really had a chance to go in and fully, address the move. But it's always tricky when, even when we're looking at off-season coaching moves, when you get a guy who's a long time and almost exclusively NFL guy. It doesn't always translate. I've done some numbers, in the past, really relying on those NFL numbers, and those seem to be, less indicative of what we can expect at the college level. So, I mean, I think the general consensus is things probably will slow down a little bit. Things probably will, maybe not shift completely, but trend a little bit more toward trying to get the running game going. So from a fantasy perspective, this definitely isn't the most welcome news. But next week I'll have a better answer for you probably. But I think my initial reaction and my guess as to where the numbers will trend is probably in a little bit of a negative direction, just as far as the amount of plays we're going to get, the amount of passing attempts, and the way that Colorado will attack. Not sure it'll be a huge change, but what we will see, I think, probably will maybe move a little bit in the wrong direction.
Nick, always the professional, telling people to tune in next week for his final thoughts on that matter. Good work, Nick. Good work. Matt, any final thoughts before we switch over? We're going to talk some Bedlam here as well, because that's really one of the bigger games here of the week. A week that actually has a bunch of ranked versus ranked matchups, which is always a good thing from a viewership perspective.
Yeah, I actually wasn't sure my camera was on. So the first time, hey guys, how's everybody doing?
Welcome to the Tailgate 2023, Matthew.
Yeah, suspension's over with. Glad to be back. I think I am very curious to see how this works out. I personally don't think Pat Shurmur was necessarily even that good in the NFL. And Nick just said that he thinks maybe that'll get the running game going. I don't know that Colorado can get the running game going. I don't think that offensive line is going to be good enough. Look, I love me some Dylan Edwards. He's not a guy you're running up the middle 15 times a game. Maybe you'll give him 4 carries up the middle. So it's gonna be interesting to see what that team looks like today. They have a very tough matchup. I'll be very curious, like Nick said, to kind of see how this works and then what he projects them moving forward, because I think that offense has been working for the most part with Sean Lewis. So it was kind of a shock move for me to see that happen. So I'm very, very curious to see what Shurmur does with this offense.
But I will say something I forgot to mention is that the most recent thing I saw from a Colorado beat reporter, not a national reporter who was breaking the story, is that it's more of a co-coordinator situation. So that Lewis is involved in the game planning and things like that, but that Shurmur is technically now the play caller. So that can be a little bit of a messy setup as well.
Wink, wink, wink. It's co. Yeah, right.
Somehow it's even worse. Jeez.
Yeah, right. So the one thing I saw, and I thought this as well at the time, Shedeur has not been playing his best football down the stretch. Do you think this is a little bit of a Deion dad move to blame the play caller to shield his son? Even if it's not his son, his quarterback set, but I think there's a lot of personal stuff happening here. I think there's a chance that he's doing this because of Shedeur getting beat up, not because Lewis has done a bad job. They want to run more, they can't run. Lewis is calling the perfect game plan every week. He doesn't have the pieces. I think this could be a little bit more like a dad move than a coach move. This is the dude who ranks his kids on Instagram, by the way. So I wouldn't be that surprised.
If anybody have any thoughts on that?
I mean, what is Pat Shurmur going to do? Are they going to line up in I formation and run, the Alton McCaskill and Dylan Edwards through the A gap? I don't think so. They don't have the personnel to do that. So I don't know what Pat Shurmur is going to do differently than Sean Lewis has already done. But I guess we're going to learn today. We'll see today.
Well, it sounds like McCaskill was actually out for the year. So that
I was going to say the funny thing is
that hurts the
McCaskill
running
asked to
game as well.
redshirt this week. Yes, so he is done for the year. So that's one less body back there for sure. It feels less like a dad move to me and more just like to take it down half a notch. Dion kind of has his inner circle of players on the team, and they're like clearly the best players. And I think all coaches, to some extent, are aware. And if you're the star, good things happen for you. But he does tend to lean, Travis Hunter, Shador, one or two other guys. So this very well could be, protecting one of the few guys in that range. Let's talk some football we're going to see today here then. Oklahoma State, one of the bigger rivalries in college football. Oklahoma coming off a tough loss to Kansas. Oklahoma State is hot. And should I say Ollie Gordon is hot. Oklahoma's won 7 of the last 8 in this series. They're the higher ranked team, but both in the initial set of college football playoff rankings that dropped this week are ranked. Oklahoma is 9th and Oklahoma State's 22nd. This is a bounce back spot and continue on spot here for both these teams, Matt. What are you going to be looking for in this game here today? What do you think the keys for success are for both of these squads?
Well, I mean, for Oklahoma State, I think the key of success is continuing to ride Ollie Gordon if you can. Dude's been on absolute fire, and I do think that's actually the weakness of the Oklahoma defense. I think their passing defense is much better than the rushing defense, so can they slow down Ollie Gordon? That will be the question. I honestly don't think that they will. With these rivalry games, I know if you watch the NFL, these when you play in a rivalry game, it's almost always close. You don't really ever see these teams blow each other out. I think both teams are closer than it appeared earlier this season, with Oklahoma State really kind of struggling to get off the map. But as you mentioned, they have looked really good the past couple of weeks. I think for Oklahoma, it's going to come down to Dylan Gabriel. Are they going to get good Dylan Gabriel? They're going to get bad Dylan Gabriel. I actually think Oklahoma State might pull the upset here. It's the last Bedlam. It's at Oklahoma State, correct? I'm not misremembering that.
It is correct.
So the home team is their last time to get this, as Oklahoma's moving to the SEC next year. The only way they're going to get this game is if Oklahoma decides to schedule Oklahoma State. Last year, when this was made a big deal, it seemed like they weren't going to do that. So I think Oklahoma State is going to go out there with the point to prove at home, knock off technically the top team in the Big 12 at the moment. I think it's going to be a very, very good game. And I think Oklahoma needs to rely on Gabriel, Oklahoma State on Ollie Gordon.
Chris, Nick, from a betting perspective, you guys are deeper into those numbers than the three of us over here. Let's kick it to you first here, Chris. I mean, what stands out to you? I think this line's kind of floated between 6, 5.5, still right around there, I believe. So it hasn't been a lot of movement there.
They're getting a lot of money coming in Oklahoma State this morning. It's down to 4.5 at Circa, which I think is pretty interesting because I'm on the other side of that. I think Oklahoma State's getting too much credit for the way they've played the last couple of weeks. I don't think they've played really great teams. But obviously they're playing better. They got shut out by South Alabama like the second week of the season. It was a frankly an embarrassing performance. I think one of the worst losses this year because South Alabama has taken a pretty good step back, in my opinion. You can't be losing those games. But they're certainly playing better. They've settled on Alan Bowman. Bowman's playing good enough because Ollie Gordon's just doing everything for the offense. I lean Oklahoma today. I think we're downgrading Oklahoma a lot from the Kansas loss. They had a loss coming. They were playing with fire too much. I think we're downgrading them from the loss. I think we're upgrading Oklahoma State too much. So I think Oklahoma takes care of business today. Maybe not like big time, but good enough.
When we're talking about Oklahoma, I want to make sure that we mention Tyree Walker, who had the most carries that he's had all season last week against Kansas. I think it was 24 carries for 140 yards or something. And he's wearing number 29 for OU at 5'9", 215, 220, whatever he is. He looks very similar to another 29 at OU a couple of years ago coming out of there. Not only that, but he's also a JUCO prospect, and he's from Las Vegas. Like, the similarities between he and Ramondre Stevenson are there. All of those things, and plus, if you remember that last season at OU, Ramondre Stevenson was suspended for like the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season and then really turned it on at the end of the year. We saw against Kansas, Tawee Walker getting the boatload of the carries over Javonte Barnes, over Gavin Sawchuk, and any of the running backs there. We could see a similar, deployment of Tawee Walker down the stretch here, given how he performed last week. So I'd watch for him also.
Felix, you're going to be really happy when we get to the weekly rankings segment because there's a name on there. I think you're going to
big boys. A lot of big boys. A lot of big boys.
One who's not 100% also. So something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. That whole running back room can never really project it on a week-to-week basis, but we're trying our best. Nick, any thoughts here on this game before we get into some of those rankings?
Yeah, this is an interesting one for the way our projections work, because one of the strongest indicators we've seen this year, they're the ones that I've been picking out as our best bets, and have had a good little run this year, is when we have a favorite who is projected to cover in all 3 of our projection models, and it's pretty clear on Oklahoma this week. They fall in that category. There's a significant talent edge. The model that looks at stats only really likes Oklahoma, is much more of a believer in Oklahoma than it is Oklahoma State. And then our primary model that throws all of that in, as well as coaching history and things like that, there's a clear edge on Oklahoma. However, this is a little bit of a unique case, and Matt brought up some really great points, some things that our numbers can't account for, this being perhaps the last, or certainly the last on the schedule edition of this great rivalry, and what is an appropriate amount of home field advantage that maybe is more than we traditionally put in to our projections that could play a factor here. So even though the numbers are clearly on the side of Oklahoma, my confidence levels, not necessarily super high, just because there are so many outside factors that maybe we can't account for in this particular game.
Good old rivalries. We're going to actually pick that game at the end of the show, so hang around for that. We'll give you our final picks there. Let's get into some of these weekly rankings here, guys. As we always do, we have a model over at Campus2Canton, spits out the numbers in terms of who it projects to be the best on the day, ties in a lot of different data points, including the point total for projected point total for the game, how this player has been playing lately, etc. Let's jump into quarterbacks here, and I think we're starting to get to the point of the season where it's a lot of names that you mostly expect, but there are a few interesting ones on here. Drake May at the top again here for the second week in a row. They take on Campbell today. So, could be a big day. Could be a day where they get out early and rest everybody. JJ McCarthy is second. I think that one's interesting. We haven't gotten a big game out of him yet this year. Keegan Shoemaker from Sam Houston State is number 3. They take on Kennesaw State. Michael Penix Jr. is 4th. Obviously, USC there, shootout potential there. Frank Harris at 5. UTSA takes on North Texas. And then Chandler Rogers there at 6 on the other, North Texas takes on UTSA. So, both guys there. Bo Nix at 7 from Oregon. Zion Chris, the UL running back or quarterback, well, basically running back. They take on Arkansas State. Jaden Daniels, LSU quarterback, number 10, Kaden Salter. Liberty taking on Louisiana Tech. Diego Pavia from New Mexico State. They have Middle Tennessee. Caleb Williams, USC taking on Washington there. Jalen Milroe, again on the other side of that LSU-Alabama matchup. And then Carson Beck, Georgia takes on Missouri. He's been heating up a little bit here. Nick, as always, I come to you first on this. Any names that stand out that you really like this week, your numbers really like, but we do not have in our top 14?
Yeah, a couple that jumped out to me. My numbers, which operate a little bit differently, take into a longer window of history and play caller data. TJ Finley comes in pretty high this week. Texas State quarterback. They're going up against Georgia Southern, a defense that certainly can be vulnerable at times. And consistently, we've been higher on Cam Ward at Washington State. He is top 10 this week in my projections, and going up against Stanford. Not a bad matchup there, even though he and Washington State specifically have been kind of up and down, especially in the most recent weeks. Still see an opportunity potentially for him today as well.
We have Finley at 22nd overall on the week, so pretty close, but not quite there. And then Cam Ward at 45th on the week, but still projected to about 21 fantasy points on the day. Felix, any thoughts there on our quarterbacks? I know you got to be a Z on Chris guy, right? He seems like your style at quarterback.
I'm a Carson Beck guy, as I have been this entire season, and I was viciously attacked for my opinions on Carson Beck last year, but Georgia's like 4th in the country in total passing yards, or top 15 or so in yards per attempt in passing. We know that running game hasn't been hitting like it has been in previous years. Shocking to see Carson Beck up here, not only here in the top 14, but also in the top 5 or so in Heisman rankings. Who said that at the beginning of the season, and who was viciously mocked and ridiculed? This guy was. So Carson Beck, I'm firing him up. I'm also firing up Lad McConkey too, by the way.
I got a Carson Beck Heisman ticket, Felix. I've got one. It's got your name written on it. I'll give you 1% of it if it hits. 1%.
Do you have the 10,000 to 1?
No, I got it.
When I looked at it, it was 2,000. 2,000.
I think I got it around 8,000 to 1. So it moved a little bit.
It was 10,000. It opened 10,000 to 1.
And
day after the season.
And Brock Vandegrift was what? Like, it was, the odds were
4,001.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. They're not serious people, whoever set those odds. You're not serious people.
Chris, Matt, any thoughts on our quarterback rankings here for today? Any guys there that maybe you don't love that are there?
I honestly think it's our cleanest ranking yet. You kind of figuring out who is good. I think Caleb Williams should be top 5. I mean, he's top 12, so it's not like all those players I expected to score a ton of points. But I mean, the total in that USC Washington game is like 78. So I think both he and Micah Penix Jr. could easily be quarterback 1 this week.
Yeah, the only player I think probably should have been up there is Jordan Travis. I mean, Pitt's defense is not very good. He's been playing.
Pitt stinks.
I mean, Pitt's got some injuries and some other stuff going on, so I'm not sure their defense is going to be really good today. But Travis has been playing really good outside of that Virginia Tech game. I was kind of surprised to see he didn't make the top 14 here.
He is number 16, so literally right there. Him and Garrett Green were right outside, so within half a point of the projected top 14. So not far off there. All right, let's jump into the running backs. And, I think, like you just said, clean rankings. I think we've kind of figured out the guys that are weekly kind of getting the volume that we like, the production that we like. Omarion Hampton, North Carolina running back. Again, they have Campbell this week. All the UNC guys are – the number 1 wide receiver is also a UNC player, although there's some injury issue there. So we'll discuss that when we get there. But a big week projected for the Tar Heels offense. Bucky Irving at Oregon, they take on Cal. He's 2nd. Ollie Gordon, as we talked about earlier there, taking on Oklahoma. He's 3rd. Blake Watson, the Memphis running back who has been on fire lately. They have USF, a nice spot there for him. Marshawn Lloyd, part of that USC Washington shootout at 5. Liberty's Quentin Cooley, who has getting close to double-digit touchdowns there on the year at 6. Jalen White at 7. Georgia Southern running back. Dejon Edwards, the Georgia running back at 8. Jarquez Hunter at number 9. Auburn has a soft matchup there against Vanderbilt this week. Tyree Walker, and we'll talk about his injury here momentarily. Jalen Wright from Tennessee, they take on UConn. Ismail Mahdi, the Texas State running back. 13, Mekhi Hughes. I think that's the first time he's shown up on here. Maybe the second, the Tulane running back. He's taking that job over, and they take on East Carolina today. And then Blake Corum, who has been steady but unspectacular this year. Michigan takes on Purdue, and after Purdue's head coach went out and made some public comments on the Michigan scandal, we might see some scoring there for Michigan. Nick, what stands out to you here at the running back position?
Well, one that's probably the highest on my list, looks like is the highest on my list that is not on the rankings on the site. But I it's one I personally am struggling a little bit with because Carson Steele, UCLA, going up against Arizona, had a pretty good run, but last week specifically really had some fumbling issues and spent some time on the sidelines. As a result, I'm not 100% sure how that's going to play out. But a name that we really probably should have a good bit higher, coming off a huge week, and also has a good matchup and a team we now all, I think, hate in Merrimack, is UMass's K'Ron Adams. Pretty good spot. UMass is it's not your normal FBS FCS matchup. UMass is going to be in for a fight probably in that one to get a win, and so they're going to really lean on Adams, and he's having a great season and coming off a huge game as well.
Our numbers,
They're 17-point favorites.
hate Adams,
by the way.
which is interesting. Huh? Who's a 17-point favorite, Chris?
UMass 17-point favorite over Merrimack.
I was preparing for you to say that Merrimack was a 17-point favorite. That's the kind of team that we sometimes get when we're talking UMass.
This could be back-to-back wins for you.
I don't want to. Sorry, I don't want to get worked up about Merrimack. Sorry.
we all got a little burned by them a few weeks ago. So we don't hold grudges here. Well, maybe one of us does. Felix, Amarian Hampton, the number one back this week. Another
Shocking.
one of hashtag your
Crazy.
guys. Tawi Walker.
Yeah.
Those are how many other guy? Anybody else here on the list stand out to you? Or you want to talk about those two guys?
Who else is above 230 pounds?
I mean, Amarian Hampton here at number one. Oh, he's too slow. He doesn't move well. Oh, my goodness. Wow, it's shocking to see. I mean, they do get Campbell today, so it's not the biggest opponent, but I think he's leading the ACC in rushing. So, the player of the year in North Carolina, 2021? Yeah, he's having an excellent season, even though George Pettaway is injured. British Brooks is still there, and Amarian Hampton has a lock on that job. I am starting Jermaine Brown Jr., kind of where in places where I have him. I mean, he's only averaging 4.9 yards per carry, but he's involved in both the passing and running game, and he has running back and wide receiver eligibility on FanTrack. So they got Florida Atlantic today. So, I mean, you're heading towards the playoffs. You need some roster flexibility. Jermaine Brown Jr. is averaging 18 points on the season. Yeah, over 18 points on the season, and is involved in both aspects of the offense, running and passing. So I'm starting him.
The numbers agree with you, Felix. We have him as the RB17 on the week in our rankings. So and just
you never really
piling
know.
Up.
I never really know if the numbers are going to agree with me or not. I always think that Nick is going to just tell me why I'm wrong here, but glad to see that. The numbers are helping me out today.
And the other running back, I can't remember his name right now, is out for the season. He went down, I think, 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, Brown's getting all the touches.
Yeah, that
Isaiah
definitely
Jacobs is down.
There you go, Isaiah Jacobs.
Who was started at Maryland? That's Josh Jacobs' little brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like,
Is it
when I
or
saw
cousin?
that, I
Is it
think
brother?
it's his little. I thought it was his little brother.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's his little brother, and he was there with Penny Boone at Maryland. They were both there in that backfield.
It's pretty crazy, that backfield that also had Hemby and Ramon Brown there. That's actually, low key. It was a pretty good college football running back room. And we actually at one point liked most of those guys at some point along the process. That's
Hey, the only miss is Isaiah Jacobs. Penny Boone's dominating.
Penny Boone is dominating. He had the long touchdown run this week. By the way, Toledo, that was the first snow game of the year, I think, in college or pro. That Toledo game. I was like, ooh, do not miss being in Kalamazoo, Michigan right now.
I woke up the next morning to some flurries here in Pittsburgh. So I was like, oh, there we go. Matt, any final thoughts on the running backs here before we shift over to the wide receivers?
No, I mean, I'll say I'm probably going to get roasted for this one. I think Travion Henderson deserves to be a little bit higher. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Why there's some stuff going on at Ohio State. He's finally healthy. In the 2 games that he was healthy this year, it was over 100 plus yards against Notre Dame, obviously over 100 yards against Wisconsin last week. I know Rutgers' rushing defense is very good. I believe they're 34th in the nation right now, but they haven't played a single good team outside of, I guess, Michigan. No, I shouldn't say I guess. Michigan's a good team, but Blake Corum actually had a pretty good game against them, as did Braylon Allen. Devin Brown's back today. Kyle McCord dealing with an ankle injury. I think Ryan Day is going to lean a lot on the run. I think Trayvon's going to end up having a pretty good game. Mine Williams out for the year too. My goodness, Chip Tranum has not really necessarily looked that good. Like maybe Dallin Hayden gets some run, but I think they're going to lean a lot on Trayvon today.
Matt, if you had to guess where Trayvon Henderson ranks this week in our numbers in relation to Jermaine Brown Jr., where would you think that those two come in versus each other?
Versus Jermaine Brown junior
Mm-hmm.
Who did the rankings? Was it Moxley?
Our model?
Our model?
No,
our model
not anymore.
takes into the fact that it hates me, so I would say he's probably like in the 20s.
They're projected for exactly the same points, down to two decimal
I
places.
knew that's where that was going.
Good plays both there. Wide receivers, another UNC guy, as I mentioned, projected at 1, but I have not seen any final news on this. Devontae Walker, is he projected to play today, gentlemen? Have we seen anything there? He was taken to the hospital after last week's game.
My personal,
He's on the field right now.
Wow. I was going to say my personal way of operating is if a guy was in the hospital last week, I usually remove him from my lineup. So,
and my thoughts here is that dude, didn't get to start the season. How much? Think about it. How much is every game to Devontae Walker worth in actual dollars? It's a lot. We're talking about a lottery ticket because he has first-round NFL athleticism. He just has to put it on tape consistently. I think if there is any way that he can get on the field, I think that he is going to, because we are talking about every game that he plays, that he shows out, it's the potential for life-changing money, getting closer and closer to that lottery ticket. So if there's any way that Devontae Walker can get on the field, I think that he's getting on the field.
All right, Devontae's going for 50 this week, folks. We heard it first. He's our projected.
He's on the field warming up.
There we go.
Right now.
There we go.
So whether or not he plays, I don't know, but there's literally a picture of him catching the football on my timeline.
He went from Kent State to UNC for this opportunity, didn't get it to start. He is going to be on the field if he can.
Do we know what the injury was? I know he went to the hospital. Was it head or neck, or was it ribs?
Upper body is what they said.
Ribs is, yeah.
Okay. If it's ribs, it's probably just pain tolerance then.
Him and Torrey Horton both hanging out together on the pain tolerance train this week with the rib injuries. Fun times there. Okay, we've got some other guys to talk about here. So this information came out after we had this graphic all put together. So Jalen McMillan is out today, so I apologize, but he was projected as our second wide receiver in our rankings. So that will adjust. He is no longer in there. I would say bump up Jalen Polk and Rome Odunze, but they're both top 9. There's not much room to bump either of them at this stage. Ricky White, the UNLV wide receiver, he's sitting at wide receiver 3 this week. They take on New Mexico. Alec Eomanor is actually on here as well at 5, and I have not seen an injury update on him either. Do we know if he's going this week? He had a shoulder injury suffered late in Stanford's game last week. I have not seen any further update on that, and that is a later game. It's not a noon kickoff, so playing around with some fire there if he's not available. Troy Franklin, or Nick, you're making a face like you're reading something there. Any info? Any thoughts?
So there was a report earlier in the week that hopeful sounds like the best term for his availability.
All right, there you go. This is a guy that we saw put up almost 300 yards on Travis Hunter a few weeks ago, and he hasn't really slowed down too much since. Troy Franklin, the Oregon wide receiver, is next on the list here. Joshua Cephas, UTSA, at 7. Jamori Macklin, the North Texas leading guy there, at 8. I said Rome Odunze at 9. Roderick Burns, actually, so 2 North Texas guys in the top 10 here. UTSA's pass defense. We'll let you put those two together and figure out how strong of a unit that is. Lincoln Victor, Washington State, at 11. Malik Washington, the revelation for Virginia, he's at 12. Caleb Hood, very consistent on a week-to-week basis. Georgia Southern takes on Texas State. And then Noah Smith, who's been just getting tons of targets for Sam Houston State since the conference games rolled around here. They took on Kennesaw State. He's at 14. And we'll give you one more name since Jalen McMillan is out. Joey Hobart, the Texas State wide receiver, is next up there. No Malachi Corley, no Marvin Harrison Jr., no Malik Neighbors in our top 14. I'm assuming, Nick, that those are some names that you might like. And for the record, they are very close in our numbers, but not quite there this week.
Yeah, Harrison is number 2 in our ratings, which again have a wider window, longer timeline that we look at. And Neighbors is number 9. So yeah, definitely those two. One name that sticks out to me a little bit, we might be a little bit different, LeJontay Wester, the FAU wideout, top 5 this week. I believe he leads the nation in receptions. At least he did this time last week. Really, really good player, fun to watch, and a decent matchup against UAB today.
We have him right around 30, but from like 15 to 30, there's like a 2 PPR point projected difference. So yeah, we've got him right in that range as well, as we do with Harrison, Neighbors, and a few other names that have been pretty hot lately. Keon Coleman is in that range as well. Matt, any, Marvin Harrison, do you expect them? I know you were just talking about, Kyle McCord a little banged up. Do you think they're going to lean on the run? Do you think that, Marvin Harrison is 130 yards and 2 touchdowns too much to ask for some of us this week?
No, I don't think it's too much to ask. I think he's definitely going over 100, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. I think he's still going to go out there and have a good game. Like I said, even though McCord is beat up with the ankle, which does worry me a little bit as Devin Brown is back. Maybe we actually see Devin Brown back in the game. I think that Marvin is still going to be the number 1 option, regardless who the quarterback is. And Day knows he has a matchup with Michigan right around the corner at this point. They've got to get that offense clicking on all cylinders if they want to try and win that one. So I think he's going to have a pretty good game today. The only one that surprised me too is Keon Coleman. Like I said, Pitt, they're just dealing with some stuff. Not that they're a bad team, but they're dealing with some stuff. And I think that defense, that pass defense is just not good. Jordan Travis, I think, has a good game. So I think Keon Coleman does as well.
Yeah, for sure. He's going to get those targets. And I haven't seen anything on Johnny Wilson's status this week, but when Wilson's out, Coleman, generally a pretty strong play there. Chris, any final thoughts around the wide receivers before we talk about your guys, the tight ends?
I don't remember now, but was Jermaine Burton listed?
He is 23rd actually in our rankings this week, 21.4 projected PPR fantasy points.
I feel pretty good about Alabama's ability to score through the air today. I think I would be starting with confidence.
There we go. All right, let's jump to those tight ends. And I don't know what else there is to say about this position, but the fact that it's pretty much been decimated at this point in the year. We've got Dallin Holker, who already played, so obviously we don't put the guys that have already played on here. And other than that, it's getting thin. Jack Velling, Oregon State's tight end, who's been pretty consistent, is at 1. Colston Loveland, the Michigan tight end, at 2. Bryson Nesbitt has been pretty solid the past few weeks for UNC at 3. RJ Maryland, SMU there. They take on Rice at 4. Ohio State's Cade Stover at 5. Mason Fairchild from Kansas at 6. Florida State's Jaheim Bell at 7. Again, they're taking on a Pitt team that's dealing with some stuff. Alex Bauman, Tulane at 8. Shimon Medier at 9. And this is really just how thin it is. He really hasn't done much in 2 weeks, but that's just the tight end position right now. Jake Brenningstool, a guy who's been targeted pretty heavily lately for Clemson. They take on Notre Dame today. River Helms from Western Kentucky there at 11. Trey Knox, South Carolina tight end, at 12. Trey Watson, Fresno State tight end. They take on Boise State. He's at 13 there. And then Amon Green from Georgia State. Not going to lie, a name that I'm not super familiar with at 14. Nick, I mean, seems like all the names we should have on there. Who are we missing?
So yeah, my numbers are pretty similar. One that perhaps is missing, and he's definitely been hit or miss, but Amari Niblack from Alabama, that matchup against LSU, one of the worst statistical defenses in the country. Secondary has been just really, really hurt this year. And then one kind of a somewhat similar situation. Clemson secondary is going to be is really banged up. It looks like they're going to have multiple guys out today against Notre Dame. And we got news, last week that Mitchell Evans, tight end at Notre Dame, torn ACL, out for the year. So if you have to get creative, a guy potentially who you could pencil in there and has been productive so far this year is Holden Stays at Notre Dame. So if you're like me and have 4 or 5 guys on your injury list at the tight end position, you might be able to scoop up a guy like that who's potentially in a good spot to have a productive day.
Chris, any thoughts on the tight ends this week?
I'm surprised we don't have Ben Sinnott ranked. He's done nothing the last 2 weeks. I think he's 1 reception for 6 yards. May have been hurt 2 weeks ago. But yeah, I think I would play him this week. I expect, Kansas State's going to have to pull out all the stops to try to beat Texas today. So I would put him on this list, especially above a guy like Amon Green, who I didn't even know existed until today. And I'm pretty deep in the weeds with this stuff, I think.
Isn't that the old Green Bay running back?
Yeah. I think it's spelled differently, but yeah.
Huh. Making a resurgence here at tight end. Felix, thoughts on the tight end landscape here today?
Yeah, I just, we can never forget the guys who have dual eligibility. Corey Dytrus, Maryland, if you're in a pinch, make sure he's healthy. I don't want to start tight end against Ohio State, but if you're in a pinch. And then Dalvin Smith had his at Western Kentucky, had one of his best games of the season last year, who, also has tight end eligibility also. I think he had like 7 receptions for 80 yards, didn't score a touchdown, but Austin Reed is going to Malachi Corley and Dalvin Smith. So those are some options that I would consider also. I'm actually starting in the league.
So Dalvin Smith, our rankings filter him in as a wide receiver, but if you were to drop him in the tight ends, he would have been on this list. He would have been 12th. So, right there. With a lot of these guys. Matt, you want to bring us home on tight ends before we go to break here?
It's a really interesting position.
Thank you, Matt Bruening. All right, we're going to go to break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about some start sits. We're going to give out some prize picks plays, best bets. We're going to talk some of the biggest games here across college football today. This is the Tailgate, brought to you by Better Sports.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. Like, that is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, and they let him be the quarterback for a long time, too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there. Mm-hmm. And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. There's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl. And when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. I was, he played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing, too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. Like, he was erratic. He wasn't terrible, though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
I would.
But Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game that they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky, is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yards go.
Campus2Canton.
Man, that was an intense intro there. I like that one. Get you fired up here to talk some start sits. What's up, gentlemen? Felix, Matt, Nick, Chris will be back with us again here shortly. We're the Tailgate crew from Campus2Canton. We talked some rankings for the week. We talked a little bit some storylines as well here, but now it's time to give people what they want those start sits. Guys, if you're folks, if you are listening, feel free to drop them in the chat here. And actually, we already have a couple in there. So let's get to those first before we talk about some specific names here that you guys have picked out pre-show. Drew asks, do I start Nate McCollum this week, who also has been a little injured for UNC taking on Campbell? What do we think there, guys?
I mean, when you're playing one of these FCS schools, I don't think it never hurts to start your guys in those games. You know, that could be a game where Drake May was our number one quarterback. He could be stat padding. Devontae Walker could be stat padding, and there's definitely a second wide receiver who could be stat padding, especially given Nate McCollum's versatility. I mean, he's got one of these hybrid running back wide receiver types. So if he's healthy, you don't have other options. I don't have a problem with that.
Well, that last thing you said is the key, because he did suffer a lower body injury at the end of last week, did not return to the field. So not sure, if he's 100%, would expect that, maybe he tries to go. But I'm always I'm always cautious, I should say, going up against FCS teams in a situation like that, because it's like, well, the guy's not 100%. The team might say, why risk it? Just go ahead and sit him out. I mean, I'm not sure what the line is, but my projection is North Carolina by 58. So I don't know if Mac Brown is going to necessarily take a chance on a guy like Nate McCollum or quite honestly like Tez Walker. So you made great points about if he can play, I'm sure he's going to be highly motivated to go out there and do it. But I don't know. I'm cautious. If we see those guys, I think they'll be very limited.
Drew, drop your alternatives in the chat, and we'll tell you whether the risk is worth the reward there. We've also had Corey who asks Jermaine Burton or Roman Wilson this week. Wilson, the Michigan receiver, and we did previously discuss Burton there a little bit. Chris, have any thoughts on this grouping here?
I mean, I really like Jermaine Burton today. I also think Isaiah Bond is kind of interesting for what it's worth. I don't know what Michigan's going to do today, to be honest. I think they're going to try to score as many points as possible. Their listed team total is 42.5. I think they kind of might go over that. And I think Roman Wilson could be a huge part of that. So yeah, I mean, I like all of the players to be honest. In this list, I also like Nate McCollum, and I've said I like Nate McCollum like every week, and then he doesn't perform when I say I like him. So
okay, Drew, you're sitting Nate McCollum this week. You're sitting Nate McCollum.
Yeah,
Chris
Roman Wilson.
Whatever I say, do the opposite.
Roman Wilson, who in my opinion does not deserve to wear the number 1 at Michigan, it's blasphemous. It's blasphemous. I just wanted to throw that in there.
All right, Felix. Well, while we're here, we're going to talk some start sits. Any guys stand out to you today as players that either sneaky starts or players that you want to start, but you really shouldn't here?
I mean, I asked you guys on the Slack earlier this week about Quinshon Judkins. I had to choose between him and I think Terrell Vaughn as a flex. Quinshon Judkins gets Texas A&M today. I feel like they can really shut him down defensively, and that could be, a lower scoring game. So I'm sitting Quinshon Judkins, and I think I'm starting Ladd McConkey. Had his best game of the season last week, and Chris is rolling his eyes. He played the most snaps of the season that he did last week, I believe. I think 30-something snaps. Could he play more snaps today in a game that could be higher scoring? Ladd McConkey is one I'm throwing around as far as starting today, especially if Carson Beck is going to be getting hot here down the stretch, because we thought Ladd McConkey was going to be the number 1 wide receiver. He had been healthy. He's starting to get healthy. So he's one I have to plug in some places.
Yeah, I just need to see those rosters. No, I'm just kidding. Just giving you a hard time. We've got another one that just came in here. Luke asks, full PPR, Nick Singleton, Damian Martinez, Jace McClellan, and Evan Stewart. Let's pick 2 of those. What are we thinking here, guys? Matt, who would you play here?
Well, Damian Martinez for sure. The other one's kind of tough here. I would probably go Evan Stewart. Even though he has not been good with Max Johnson, I think there's going to be I don't say a decent amount. I think this is going to be a very good game between Texas A&M and Ole Miss today. Jackson Dart has been playing a little bit better. I think he might put some points up against what is a decent defense there in Texas A&M. So Max Johnson will have to keep up. I know he hasn't, like I said, had quite the chemistry with Evan Stewart that Connor Wigman has, but I'd probably go Evan Stewart. Man, Nick Singleton has just looked bad, and I don't know. I just don't know that this is going to be a massive running game for Alabama today against LSU.
Yeah, but it should be a high scoring game though. That LSU Alabama game. I mean, you looking at the way LSU has played the last couple of weeks. If we saw 40 to 45 in this game, would you be surprised? No, I don't think so. I'd love to know what the over under is on that game. So Jace McClellan, he should be
62.
getting score. It's 62. Yeah, I mean, Jace McClellan should be getting scoring opportunities in this one. So I would go Damian Martinez and Jace McClellan. It's not Nick Singleton. It's definitely not Nick Singleton.
Chris, Nick, any other thoughts on that decision?
I took a quick look at projections this week, and Evan Stewart actually has the highest projected point total. He and Damian Martinez, but Martinez is like RB 47 for me this week. So that was a little bit of a surprise because I personally am a little more optimistic on Martinez. So I'd go Martinez and Stewart.
If you want to see Nick blow a gasket, ask him what his gut tells him. Ask him what his gut tells him.
All right. One other one here real quick, guys. Carson Beck or Byron Brown, 6-point passing TDs, which does probably change the calculus here a little bit.
Well, fortunately, on the C2C winning edge tier, we do release projections for both 4-point passing touchdowns and 6-point passing touchdowns. But I will need to filibuster a little bit.
All right, we'll
so I've got Beck at QB 25 for the week, and I've got Brown a good bit lower than that, somewhat surprisingly. My projections are probably a little bit too low on Brown. They have been most of the season, but there seems to be a pretty clear divide that Beck in that 6-point passing touchdowns comes out about 4 points higher.
Okay. Felix probably agrees.
I just love Carson Beck. I've been the only one talking about him for months. It feels like
months.
I don't have a good sense for Byron Brown's playing because I don't have him rostered anywhere. So of course I have Carson Beck rostered a lot of places. So
all right, Nick, let's come to some of your names that you've picked out here. There are a couple more start sets flowing in, but we'll get to them in a bunch here in a minute or two. Who are you kind of looking at this week as some options?
So it's possible that it's a situation of getting too cute, but I've touched on a little bit of my thinking in a couple of spots already. With Tez Walker in the hospital last week, with Nate McCullum banged up at the end of last week, with Gavin Blackwell dealing with some injuries, with Kobe Paysor out for an extended period of time, I went through and picked up just about anywhere JJ Jones, and I'm going to go ahead and plug him into all my lineups. Playing against Campbell, my gut Felix tells me that we're not going to see a whole lot of Walker or McCullum, which I think will create a lot of opportunities for JJ Jones. So he's definitely somebody that I've targeted this week. We'll see how it works. A little bit of a gamble, but I think there's definitely some upside for him against a weak opponent, and especially with a short list of other receivers that are at 100%.
Conversely, I know you kind of talked about Carson Steele a little bit earlier, and he was out-touched last week as well, which is, I think, noticeable by TJ Harden there. So him, and then anybody else that you're sitting this week?
Yeah, if you've got the opportunity, if you've got a lot of running back options, there were a couple of spots where I did decide to sit Steele, and another one that I just don't feel great about his level of availability is Nate Noel. We heard coming into the game last week for App State that Noel is back, fully healthy. He played 5 snaps last week, so until I see him get a little bit more of a heavier workload, and Kanye Roberts has looked pretty good, getting a more of an opportunity. So until I see Noel sort of retake that top spot on the depth chart, I'm a little shy to play him. So if I've got some flexibility, I'm sitting both Steele and Noel.
All right, some more start sets here. So let's get into some of these here. Jalen Wright, the Tennessee running back, who we have projected pretty well against UConn this week, or Ladd McConkey versus Mizzou. It's an interesting one. What do you guys think here? Is it if Sean, if you're still tuned in, is it PPR? Because I think that could change things a little bit. I like the volume that Wright's going to get, like, just straight off the bat. We know he's going to get probably 10 to 15 carries against a bad rush defense. That's probably where I'd lean. I don't think either's a bad option today.
Ladd McConkey had a great week last week, like 135 receiving yards, and he still has 15 receptions or 242 yards on the season. So, like, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves with Ladd McConkey. I'm just saying, dude is under 250 receiving yards. I'm playing Jalen.
He hasn't played. What are you talking about? He's only played like 3 games. So
he's played 4 games.
Yeah, he's played 4.
He's played limited. I have his snaps right here. He's played 4 games, and he's played 20, 26, 19, and then 39 snaps in week 7, and then 33 snaps last week. So he hasn't even playing a full complement of snaps. He's getting healthier as the season goes on here. Come on, guys. Let's.
Would you play him over Jalen Wright, who gets UConn today?
I don't know. I don't have Jalen Wright anywhere, so I don't have to make that decision.
What's your gut say?
Well, yeah, what's the gut say? Come on.
I think that this Georgia game is going to be high scoring today, and I think that Ladd McConkey is going to be the number 1 for Carson Beck. That's what I think.
All right. Kevin asks, Talia Tagovailoa, the Maryland quarterback, or Jack Plummer, how optimistic should we be in the Maryland offense today?
So I'm here in Louisville. They got Jack Plummer. Jack Plummer has a NIL deal with some plumbing company around here, of course. For whatever billboards are, you're not starting Talia against Ohio State today. So, I mean, by default, I think same thing. I'm going with, I think Jack Plummer has what? Virginia Tech? Yeah.
But that Louisville offense sounds like Jamari Thrash is a game time decision. But on the flip side, George Jordan's not 100%. But they're dealing. Everybody's banged up. But yeah, it sounds like Louisville's one that's got several key guys that are not 100% today.
Our model likes Lil Tua by about 3 points more, but it doesn't really like either of them this week. Both projected under 20 points. So, tough there. I don't think either, is going to be a game breaking option for you this week. There's that. Let's see. Drew did say, by the way, we were talking earlier, but he said, should I start Nate McCollum? He said his other options are Berrien Brown, Devin Mockabee, and Ashton Hawkins. How do we feel about that? Any updates to our McCollum thoughts with that information? Good talk, everybody. Everyone's thinking real hard about this.
I'd be tempted to roll out Hawkins. I know that he's in a situation at Texas State where it's kind of a revolving, is he number 2? Is he number 3? Will he occasionally poke out and be number 1? So I think that his upside in that offense, and mentioned that our numbers, the CFP winning edge projections really like TJ Finley this week, that Hawkins, I think, would be my pick out of that group.
I agree. What's the total in that game?
3 for 3.
69.
Nice.
A lot of points.
Matt starts sits this week. What do you like? What do you hate?
Yeah, I'll start with, I already talked about it earlier with Travion Henderson. I think you should be starting him. Again, I know Rutgers' defense has been very good, but when they actually played 2 good running backs, they gave up a decent amount of yardage in Blake Corum and Braylon Allen. When he was healthy, again, against a very good Notre Dame defense and Wisconsin, he went over 100 yards. He's the guy in the backfield. No Mayan Williams. Chip not playing well. Downs probably the only guy who affects him. I actually just got a picture sent to me earlier. Devin Brown and Kyle McCord's left and right ankles are taped so heavily. Neither one is walking very well. I think they are going to lean heavily on Travion Henderson in that run game today. Again, I know Rutgers only allowing 120 yards per game, but I think Henderson's going to be in for a massive game today. They have given up 6 touchdowns on the ground. I think he's a guy you must be starting in your lineup.
So, Matt, here's a quick question for you.
Yes.
Is Lincoln Kineholz the QB3?
I believe technically Tristan Jebbia is listed as the QB3, but Ryan Day has done a lot of talking up of Lincoln Kineholz of late.
So if your league has open waivers in the morning and you can go grab Lincoln Kineholz before today's game and you have a bench spot to do that, would you suggest somebody does that with the, what's going on here?
I mean, I would have done it anyway, but I don't think he gets in at any point for Ohio State personally, unless they just. The thing is, if you go back and look at Ohio State versus Rutgers games, Ryan Day doesn't run it up against, why is his name not in my head? Shiano. He doesn't run it up against Shiano because they are legitimate friends.
Wait, does he not? I thought this was the team where they ran for like 800 yards every year on, and they put up
before
like 55.
Shiano got there. Yeah, before Shiano got there. No, he didn't. So he doesn't really run it up on Shiano. I don't think we're going to see Kineholz today. I think we'll see McCord for a little bit. If his ankle gets bad, I think they're going to put Brown out there. We might see Tristan Jebbia. I would not be surprised. I don't think this offense needs to do much personally to beat Rutgers because I think that defense is going to hold the Rutgers offense down. So I don't think it's going to be a massive high-scoring game. But I think they're going to lean heavily on Travion Henderson.
Okay.
Notable friends who collaborated to take
to bring down Michigan to get a Stallions fired and all that other good stuff. So
Ryan Day's going to get a RICO charge.
Probably. That's all right though. We'll be all right. Who I'm sitting, Ted McMillan. Poor performance last week, I think mostly due to the quarterback switch. But UCLA's pass defense is no joke. Ranks 9th in the country. They've only allowed 9 receiving touchdowns on the year. Well, I think Ted is an extremely good wide receiver. I think that they're going to struggle to pass the ball again here today, and I think he's in for another rough game.
All right. No more start sits coming in. Keep them coming, guys, if you've got them. Chris, do you have any final thoughts here? We can talk some prize picks after this. I know you guys have a lot of prize picks entries that you like this week.
Yeah, I mean, talked about it when we talked about quarterbacks, but I really like Garrett Green today. He's also on my prize picks. I think he has a big game against BYU. I don't think BYU is very good. I think they're actually, frankly, terrible, and they don't have Keaton Slovis this week. I wonder if that team quits a little bit on defense.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to watch there. All right, let's get into prize picks, guys. Promo code C2C if you're signing up over there, gets you a deposit match up to $100 on your first deposit there. And we're going to give you some winners today. So go ahead, sign up, and we're going to tell you what to play to increase that initial deposit. Wow, Nick, why don't you hit us with some of these lines. I sent you a lot in fairness this week, but man, you really took a look at these.
Well, so if this is your first time listening to my explanation on here, our player projections, they've at the very beginning of the year, they trended really heavily toward unders. That's worked itself out for the most part, but I've had some success seeing where we project a pretty big edge on overs just to try to take advantage maybe of the skew to the under. So there were 5 that jumped out at me, a couple of passing yards overs and a couple of rushing yards overs. KJ Jefferson, Arkansas quarterback, over 201.5 passing yards. We project 238. And then I think an additional layer to that our numbers don't actually even account for is the change in offensive coordinator with Arkansas going away from Dan Enos. I expect that they'll make that additional effort to open it up a little bit potentially. So I like the value there. Projections are quite high on Tony Muskett this week. Virginia plays Georgia Tech. They played a lot of really high scoring games lately. I think there's definitely an opportunity there. Over 232.5. We've got 281.5. And then some rushing ones where we quite honestly probably show a bigger edge than maybe we should, but see an edge in DJ Giddens, K-State running back, over 55.5. Rutgers running back, Kyle Monangai, over 45.5. And Purdue running back, Devin Maccabi over 33.5. And obviously, Monangai and Maccabi specifically, those are very, very tough matchups against Ohio State and Michigan, respectively. But, our projections do take into account the opponent that they're playing, the level of talent on the roster, team performance, point totals, things like that as well. And we still see, more than a couple of dozen yard potential edge there. So maybe we're a little too high, but I do think there's some value on those guys.
All right. By the way, it looks like news has just come in. Chris is saying that Jamari Thrash is out today. So Louisville's leading wide receiver there. I am rapidly taking him out of all my lineups. So somebody go ahead with their prize picks plays so I can adjust some lineups here. And Felix is muted. Classic. What do you like, Felix?
And then I got a whole bunch of buttons to press to unmute myself. I really like this LSU and Alabama game. I think the same way where, we kind of trend towards the under in Ohio State games this year, given how that team is playing, it's the opposite for LSU. So LSU ranks 89th in total defense. They gave up 31 to Arkansas, 55 to Ole Miss, 39 to Missouri. I think that game is going to go back and forth, and I like some of these prize pick lines where one thing has to happen. Well, they have an over-under on Brian Thomas Jr. for just a half a touchdown. So 1 touchdown today for Brian Thomas Jr. I like that one. And then I've said this guy's name a lot today. I think Ladd McConkey continues to get more snaps for Georgia. I like over 58.5 receiving yards, over 4 receptions. Nick's projections, he's got 4.3 receptions. He's actually got the under on receiving yards of 57.4. So as wide receiver 1, Ladd McConkey has the ability to break one, and he has the ability to get a little bit more volume, a little bit more snap share. And I think that we hit the over on 60 yards. It just doesn't seem like a lot for the way that Georgia is playing if Ladd McConkey is healthy. So give me Ladd McConkey today. Give me Brian Thomas Jr. in prize picks.
Chris?
Yeah, I got a few. I like the KJ Jefferson call. I think the offense is really going to change, but I'm actually going with his over on rushing yards, over 29.5. I just didn't think they were utilizing his legs enough, and I think they do. I think they go back to like KJ Jefferson, who is a legit bull running the ball. He's a tough dude to bring down. I like the Malik Murphy over 180.5. I think that they really didn't show anything last week on tape on purpose. They didn't really redesign their offense, and I think that he's a different type of player than Quinn Ewers and how they both operate. So I think we're going to get a good Malik Murphy game. 180 is just a little bit low for me. I think it should probably be about 200. I've been talking about Garrett Green all morning, over on his fantasy points, 22.5. He's hit this almost every week. He's just a really good rusher. So you have the ability to get 10 points or more from rushing ability. Another coordinator change that I think is going to have an impact, Shadur Sanders, under 302.5 passing yards. I think they're going to try to run more. Don't think it's going to work, but I think they're going to try. And I think that the offense is kind of sputtering. I think it's going downhill. So I like his under as long as it's under 300. And then I've been back and forth on this one, so it's an extra one. Brendan Sullivan, Northwestern quarterback, over 0.5 interceptions. I think he's going to throw one against Iowa today. That game's at Wrigley. Total's 29. Total, I think it's probably 31 now. It's going to be interesting. So I think you get one interception from him. Not a very strong passer.
Oh, that total went up, huh? Interesting.
It opened at 29.5, and I think it's going to end at 31.
I might take the under on it before kickoff there. That's interesting that it moved that way. Matt, bring us some on the prize picks for the day.
Yeah, sticking with my call on Travion Henderson, his over-under on there is 82.5 rush yards. Again, I think he goes over that fairly easily. I'm taking him there. Marvin Harrison Jr., 101.5 receiving yards. I'm taking the over. 160, 126, 163, 105, 162, 123. whoever's at quarterback's targeting Marvin Harrison Jr. is the only player they seem to really target. While Emeka Egbuka looks like he is going to be back today, reports are he's dancing on the field. His ankle is taped, but I think if he's dancing on the field, he's going to play. Maybe that hurts Marvin Harrison a little bit, but going over 100 yards is what Marvin Harrison does. I think that's an easy one.
Is it a dance that requires a lot of lateral movement, or what are we getting a look at
that
here?
part I didn't find out. I was just told he's dancing on the field.
Okay.
Is it the electric slide or the Macarena?
I'll ask. You know what? I'll shoot off a text real quick, and when we get back from the break, I'll let you know which one he's doing so that you guys have a better idea here.
Thank you.
Last but not least, Drew Allar. I mean, look, we talked a lot about him on Devy Debate recently. He is not necessarily having a good season, but when he plays this – Barnabas, I love you. I know you're watching. No shot at Maryland here. I don't think they are necessarily a good team. When he doesn't play a good team, he passes for multiple touchdowns. I think he's going to go over the 1.5. And I think Drew Allar's going to actually have a pretty good day.
Yeah, we're going to be bringing Barnabas on in a little bit, so he might have something to say to you about that. All right, good stuff there, guys. Go ahead, get some of those plays. And again, promo code C2C on an initial deposit will get you 100% match up to $100. We got another start set that came in actually here, guys. Jim Rubin in the comments says, "Hey guys, great show. Derwin Burgess, Georgia Southern wide receiver at Texas State, or Luther Burden at Georgia today." We haven't really talked about Burden at all in that Georgia matchup. What do we think here?
Can you squeeze both of them in? Like, are you really choosing between? I feel like both of those guys could have big days today. I would want to know, especially in my leagues where I got 4 flexes that I got to put in, I would feel like I can find a space for both of those guys.
Felix is putting Ladd McConkey in lineup, so he's got room for Burgess and Burden. All right. Sorry, I had to.
For me, it's pretty clear Burden, and part of that is somewhat unexpectedly based on where they were drafted earlier. The Georgia Southern situation, there's been sort of a clear divide where Caleb Hood has become the wide receiver 1 there. So that definitely factors in. But even against Georgia, my numbers like Burden this week.
I am basically just relying on the game total in that Georgia Southern game. Again, I talked about it earlier, 69-70. I think Georgia's going to do everything they can to take away Burden. That's my read.
Fair enough. He also asks, is Bashal Tootin playing? Does anybody have any word on that?
I will look into it.
Okay.
Haven't seen anything specific.
Okay. Todd asks, why you guys are looking. Todd asks, if Thrash is out, which it sounds like he now is, do we like Judkins or Evan Stewart in the Ole Miss A&M game? I like Judkins. What do you guys think? Matt, what do you think on that?
Oh, it's always Judkins. The answer is if it's Judkins and somebody, it's always Judkins. Now, Texas A&M's defense is much better against the run than they are the pass, but I still think Judkins ends up having a very good day today. I think his over-under set at 70-something. Again, I know Texas A&M, I want to say, Nick can probably pull this up right off the top of his head. I want to say they're ranked very high against the run, actually. I was trying to... Yeah,
they're a bad pass defense.
They are top 10 against the rush. So maybe Jackson Dart ends up having the better day, but I still think I'm starting Quinshawn over Stewart, personally.
I think that split at least allows them to move the ball and put them in scoring positions for Judkins. He's got... They have more or less than half a rush touchdown on Prize Picks, which I didn't give it any plays today, but that one did catch my eye. I do think that he's probably good for one today. Judkins or Marvin Harrison Jr. this week, Matt? Because you said
good job, good call. Judkins against the world. That's where we stand.
Really boxed into a corner on that one. All right, so there we go. Anybody else have any thoughts on Judkins versus Stewart?
Stewart really has not been playing. It's not his fault, but since Connor Wegman went down, he really hasn't been all that great for you. He is. His best game is 55 yards, and that happened last week against South Carolina.
He also suffered an ankle injury around the time that Wegman went down. So I'm wondering how much it can be allocated to each of those.
Yeah, he's been really inconsistent. I'm looking at 11 points, 8 points, 7 points, 13 points. Those are his last 4 weeks. That's not really what you're expecting.
Jim also asks Braylon Allen or Ashton Genty. Do we even think
pretty sure
either of those
Braylon
guys
Allen's
play
out.
this week?
I think they're both doubtful. Sounds like.
Yeah.
I think the answer is no.
I have
to
seen
both.
that Braylon Allen is probably not going to play. I don't even know if he's on the field for warm-ups. Tanner Mordecai is also out.
What's their projected team total today?
Probably low. Let's see. Wisconsin, Indiana, total's 45. Wisconsin favored by 8.
Oh, that's actually kind of high.
I've got Wisconsin. I'm over that, so I've got Wisconsin scoring 30, but it's probably more like 24.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
20 implied total's 28. I think. I'm just doing mental math.
This isn't a math show; it's a football show. Sorry, folks.
Not a math show.
All right. Yeah. Keep those questions coming, guys. If you got any more, we are happy to answer them. All right. So let's do an injury check-in here, and then let's hit Corey and Mike. They do their Devy segment every week. We'll jump into that before we head to break. Johnny Wilson out this week. Barnabas has said that he found. So there you go. We talked a little bit earlier about that. Probably helps Keon Coleman. Does that help anybody else? Like, do we see Trey Benson as a benefactor there? I mean, this does have the potential to be a blowout. So, sometimes those things are hard to predict.
At tight end, Jaheim Bell, I mean, he's a versatile player. And if Johnny Wilson is out, fire up the guy I always forget who's the tight end from North Carolina State who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's who we remember. Jalen Samuels. No, Jalen Samuels. Jalen Samuels. That's what Jaheim Bell reminds me of. So he had his moments.
Pittsburgh tried to use him more as a fullback than a tight end.
And he had tight end. He had a tight end eligibility, which is like the same way. I mean, you can use Jaheim Bell as a running back as he did last year at South Carolina, and he can get jet sweeps. I mean, Jaheim Bell, I think, is probably the beneficiary.
Sorry, that was my inner Steelers fandom there. Just jumped on that one. My bad. Matt, you have some Cade Stover news?
Yeah, I mean, so I know he's listed, I believe, top 10 for us, top 5 tight end in our rankings. Just to give you guys an update, he is on the field, but he is wearing a massive knee brace. He is not moving well, and he was actually going through as the tight end 3 in warmups. G. Scott was actually running as a tight end 1, so just be a little bit hesitant about that. I mean, I know Stover's been used a lot in the offense, and he's been very good, but it sounds like his knee is pretty banged up.
G. Scott Jr. breakout game.
Let's
coming.
go.
4 years in the making.
Oh, 4 years. Not bad. I'm not good at math.
The making. Any other injury updates, guys, that you have been paying attention to this morning?
It sounds like Rocket Sanders is going to be available for Arkansas, which I did not expect. I don't know that I would play him.
I was going to say, are you comfortable playing him this week?
Not unless I'm super desperate. And considering it's the playoffs in most leagues, you're probably got here without Rocket Sanders. So I would not look to play him. But Rashad Dubinion's not playing, and I think AJ Green is out for the year, if I remember correctly.
Oh, is he? I had not seen that. Okay.
Is it an Isaiah Augustave, David? I mean,
maybe I'm wrong about the Green stuff. I thought I read that, but maybe not. Either way. Raheem Sanders, Cade Klubnik is pretty banged up. He's going to go today, but Clemson's down 6 starters, it sounds like.
Including Will Shipley. Not sure if we mentioned that.
Yeah, Shipley's out. Tywee Walker's hurt. I don't know if he's going to go today. We mentioned Jalen McMillan, I think. Sorry.
Will Rogers out? So that sounds like not.
Will Rogers.
He is. Mike Wright is.
That's more Mike Wright news than Will Rogers news, I think, there for you. Emeka Egbuka, we were saying he's probably in. He's been dancing on the field, and we'll have an update on what dance that was exactly here shortly. And then, Jalen McMillan is out, I think, are some names that we've had floating around behind the scenes here as we've been collecting that info.
This is not somebody that you're going to start, but as a player that I'm paying attention to, I really love Eli Raridan at Notre Dame. He's been injured. He suffered an ACL injury out of high school, and then he suffered an ACL injury last year. Could he get more? He's been healthy. I mean, relatively, he's played a limited number of snaps in the last couple of weeks. Could he get more time as the season goes on with the injury there in the Notre Dame tight end room? But a super, super physical player, will thump people running after the catch. It was a player that I was really high on coming in, and as a freshman has just dealt with some injuries. So I just want to see if he gets on the field, shows some of that explosiveness. But quite frankly, I mean, there's the running back at Georgia Southern, Terrence Gibbs. Terrence Gibbs showed a lot of physicality coming in as a freshman, then suffered a catastrophic injury his last year of high school, and then second to last year of high school, didn't really look as good or physical afterwards. I'm kind of looking for the same thing from Eli Raridan.
Looks like Bashul Tutin is expected to play, following up an earlier question.
There we go. So there you go, Jim. And Jim also asked, is Jawar Jordan out? And we don't have any info on that yet.
He did not practice all week, but it sounds like he's going to try to go.
Okay. So there you go. So if you've got another option, I know with the injuries piling up, maybe you don't, but might be one you don't necessarily want to risk it. Is Jaden Ott playing this week? Somebody asked.
He got banged
Good question.
I've literally heard nothing about it. I checked a couple times this week.
Couldn't find anything.
Yeah, that's a good question. He left last week's game. I actually couldn't even really tell exactly what the injury was that he suffered.
I think he's going to play.
They take on Oregon, which, for the record, I don't think is a very good matchup for him. So I'm probably trying not to play him as hard as I can anyway. But if you have to play him, then I get why you're looking around.
He did meet with the media this week, which they don't usually let guys who aren't going to play talk to the media a whole lot. So I expect him to go.
All right. So there's that. That's about as well as we can read between the lines there. All right. Every week, our Devy team over at Campus2Canton.com produces a short video of some players that they think they're looking for today that are probably going to be, have an NFL future, especially for us folks that are playing fantasy football. So here they are with their segment, giving you some names that they're on their watch list today as they watch this huge slate of college football games.
What is going on, C2C family? Corey Prairie here from the Campus2Canton Devy team. We're finally starting to get a pretty clear picture of the types of names we can expect to hear in next year's draft. But it might be time to start looking ahead to next year's college football season to see what other kind of names that we can expect to be breaking out. Let's go. I want to start by bringing some attention to a Stanford duo, and that's right, I said a Stanford duo that's really starting to pique my interest down the back half of the season here, and that's starting with quarterback Ashton Daniels and wide receiver Alec Ayomanor. Now, these two guys combined for 550 yards and 4 touchdowns over the past 3 weeks as part of an aerial attack from Stanford that we haven't really been accustomed to seeing from them over the past couple of years. Despite dealing with some health issues himself to start the season, as well as being in a little bit of a quarterback battle with Justin Lamson over at Stanford, it seems like they've settled on Ashton Daniels as their guy. The true sophomore hasn't passed for less than 250 yards over the last 3 weeks. He's got 6 touchdowns to 1 interception in that time, and he's passing at a 10.2 yard ADOT, which means he's not really just taking those safe throws. At 6'2", 215 pounds, Daniels doesn't really have the elite size we like to see on our quarterback prospects, but I was actually pretty impressed with his zip on the ball on some of his passes. I want to see a little bit of improvement on ball placement. Sometimes you're seeing balls go behind guys, be a little bit off target, but things are really trending up for the Stanford signal caller. Now, on the receiving end of the majority of Daniels' passes has been sophomore wide receiver Alec Ayomanor, who stands at 6'2", 210 pounds and looks every inch of it. Now, this guy really didn't do much last year due to a knee injury and really didn't do much this season until Ashton Daniels took over about 3 weeks ago, but he hasn't had less than 12 targets in any of the last 3 games and has counted for almost 550 passing yards over the last 3 weeks. He's a very physical wide receiver, but actually sports a pretty impressive athletic profile as well that accounts for a 21.66 200-meter dash, a 10.76 100-meter dash, and a long jump state championship. Now, he isn't the most sudden mover, but if you watched Ayomanor's game against Colorado a couple weeks ago, you might think you were seeing some shades of A.J. Brown out there. Now, I want to see him kind of diversify that route tree a little bit more, not win so much on physicality, but this guy's an Alberta native from Canada as well, so you know I'll be keeping a close eye on him to see how he progresses throughout his collegiate career. Now, I want to bring some attention to a freshman wide receiver who's really started to make some waves over the past 3 weeks, and that's Florida freshman wide receiver Eugene Wilson, who hasn't had less than 64 receiving yards in any of the past 3 weeks and put up an impressive 11-catch, 75-yard, and 1 touchdown performance against a very tough Georgia Bulldog defense last weekend. This guy's a dynamic playmaker with the ball in his hands, already forcing 13 missed tackles on the year, and brings high-end athleticism to the position. The concerns with Wilson's profile probably start with his usage, where he's only seeing a 1.9 yard A-dot right now, so everything is kind of around the line of scrimmage, and with his frame, where he's only listed at 5'10", 170 pounds, so there's a chance he could fall into the bucket of your Rondale Moore / Wan'Dale Robinson gadget types, but I'm not really ready to make that assumption this early in his career. Now, if you want to see some fireworks this weekend, you better have eyes on that USC versus Washington matchup, where we're going to see the potential first overall pick in next year's draft in USC quarterback Caleb Williams going up against Heisman frontrunner Washington quarterback Michael Penix. Can Caleb Williams bounce back from this kind of off stretch he's had in the middle of the season here, and can Michael Penix continue his reign of dominance on his way to a Heisman winner and a potential sneaky first-round candidate? Now, with 2 losses on the year and an unlikely shot at the playoffs, things probably haven't gone the way the Trojans had hoped on the year, but we have got to see some flashes from this freshman group that can give us a lot of confidence in them going forward. And I'm talking about the freshman wide receiver trio of Zachariah Branch, Deuce Robinson, and Mekhi Lemon. All 3 of these guys have broken their year 1 zeros, and it was getting kind of close there for Lemon for a bit, especially because he wasn't seeing a lot of time on offense, but thanks to his special teams prowess as a returner, he did hit his 5th return, breaking that year 1 zero mold. And we have to remember, this is a guy who played with freshman quarterback Malachi Nelson in high school as well, who we all believe is the future of this program. And there's no telling what that connection could turn into in the coming years. Now, sticking with that wide receiver position, but this time going to the other side of the ball with the Washington Huskies, taking a look at their top 3 wide receivers in Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, and Jalen Polk, who's seen quite an increase in playing time since Jalen McMillan's been dealing with injury. All 3 could legitimately enter the NFL draft next year, which begs the question, who's going to be leading this wide receiver core heading into 2024? True sophomore wide receiver Jeremy Bernard is 4th on a team in receiving right now and has consistently been the next guy up when any of the top 3 guys can't play. He was a decently ranked 4-star prospect in last year's class and actually broke his year 1 zero molds at Michigan State last year before transferring over to the Huskies, and now he's lined himself up to potentially be the wide receiver 1 in a Kalen DeBoer offense heading into 2024, making him an interesting buy heading into the offseason. That about wraps it up for this week's Devy Sesh, guys. Make sure you guys are checking out the Back to Devy podcast every Wednesday morning, the #1 Devy podcast on the Campus2Canton podcast feed. Don't let anybody else tell you different, and make sure you guys are keeping it locked with Campus2Canton all season long.
Of the NHL games, I had a conversation with Coupe A Fiasco yesterday when we were producing High Stakes, and he was talking about playing video games. And I, since he covers fantasy football, I said, "Hey, are you going to be getting the new Madden this year?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't really play Madden. I play NHL." And that tells you, and it really does, that I do feel that the NHL game is better than Madden. I feel like Madden is overrated. The NHL game is so realistic. I don't know if you guys saw the trailer and all the new additions that they added to this game, but it really looks good. I tried finding all the games that I had of NHL, and I thought I had a lot. I only have 4 of them. And that's because I used to live with my my roommate and good friend who got me into hockey, and we would play most of it in his house. So he has most of the games, but I do got 21.
There you go.
I got NHL 18. We got Connor McDavid up there. NHL 12, I think, was the start of the new consoles for me. But the big one, the holy grail of NHL games, NHL 94 for the Sega Genesis, right there. Look at that. Look at that beautiful cover. Look at it. Looks like a VHS tape. That's how good this game was.
No, let me stop you right there. So people, VHS tape, if you don't know, it's this like rectangular black plastic with the magnetic tape on the inside. Tape's this big. You put it in something called a VCR. For a little while, there was something called Beta that didn't last too long.
Look at this cartridge. I mean, they're not cartridges anymore. They're either discs or those little memory cards. But man, that thing is thick, right? And
you don't even need a cartridge or a disc anymore. You can buy the digital version.
And then you got Ron Barr on the book. I mean, he used to be always in the intro telling you about the team and what was going to be happening in the game. So NHL 94 is by far my favorite game, sports game. I love that game.
Campus Campus to Canton.
What's up, guys? The Campus to Canton crew here on the tailgate, bringing you home as we get closer to this noon kickoff here, Eastern time, of course, the best time zone. We've got a couple more start sits coming in here, guys, so I do want to get to those really quickly before we talk about some of Nick and Chris's best bets. We also have some other injury news. Here's a start sit for you. I need your guys' help, actually. This is my question. Austin in the chat asks today, Seth Hennigan, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels. Hennigan has a matchup against USF. Drake May obviously has Campbell, as we talked about earlier, and then Jaden Daniels gets Alabama there. But or Garrett Green. Those are the four options. We got to pick two of those.
I think you have to go with May. You know, he's our number one projected guy, and I know there are definitely some things that we can account for. Will they be up 45-0 in the second quarter, and he's just handing the ball off all day? That's a risk, but I think you have to go with May, and then I would probably lean to Green. My numbers are pretty consistently high on Green, and my eyes have been impressed as well at times the last few weeks.
Okay, Chris, Matt, what do we all agree here? This is literally my only league where the playoff spot is still in the balance. Or I think I might have like one other one, but I got to win this week.
Well, since Nick said May and Green, I would definitely say go with Hennigan and Daniels. That's what I would do. Just because I want you to lose. So go opposite of what Nick told you to do.
Well, is it the league where you and I are fighting out for one of those playoff spots?
No, so that's my other one that we still going into this week. And man, I just feel so bad saying this, but I'm looking at my opponent this week and I'm just like, I can't lose to that team. But we shall see. All right, we got a couple other ones here in the chat. Somebody asked Xavier Legette, Ricky White, KC Concepcion, or Brian Thomas. Pick two. It's an interesting group there. I'm leaning White Thomas. What do you guys think?
I think White for sure. I'm making a couple of decisions on Concepcion as well. I know the numbers are good. I don't know. I'm not as much of a believer as some folks. I just don't necessarily trust NC State. I think is the biggest piece of it.
I mean, with Legette, the Gamecocks get the Gamecocks. So
it's a cock-off.
Yeah, it's cock-off. I kind of like Legette. I mean, Trey Knox is out. Juice Wells is out. I don't think the Jacksonville State secondary is all that good. My Gamecocks are favored by 14.5, 15. Kind of like Legette as the second option there. Although I worry a little bit about Brian Thomas. I don't know how. I mean, Alabama's defense is Alabama's defense. So
I've seen Cockadoodle Duel, by the way.
Oh, clever.
I like that.
I would probably go White and Brian Thomas, personally.
All right, so the two people who do not play CFF are on White and Brian Thomas. The others are not. So there you go. No, okay. So I think so we gave you all the info there, and I don't think any of them are awful plays. By the way, Matt just dropped that Trey Knox is out or is not dressed for pregame here. So two of our top tight ends projected for the week look like they either aren't going to go or will be severely limited. So keep that in mind there. Could that be a boost for Legette? No Trey Knox. He has been somewhat productive. Not that they're overlapping. Did you say that, Chris? Did I miss that?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Wow, that was a real call-in situation there.
You tell me you weren't paying attention without telling me you weren't paying attention.
Yeah, fun. Okay. All right, let's get into some of these best bets here this week, guys. You guys usually pick out a couple of games that you really like, and then I sit here and play all of them as you go through. So you guys go ahead, tell us what you like today. I got my sports book open. I'm ready to go and make some money here this morning.
So I'm sticking with what works for the most part. We've had some success on those when all three models agree that a favorite should cover. This first one, based on our show today, there's a lot of reason to perhaps be less than optimistic that Ohio State's going to cover a big number against Rutgers. But we picked Ohio State a few times in this spot this year, and our projections are very, very high. Have Ohio State favored by more than 20 in all three projection models. So we'll give it another try. So hopefully that secondary, I don't think they'll have too many issues against Rutgers, but they are shorthanded there. And we'll see how it plays out, but definitely do see a projected edge in Ohio State this week. Some G5 matchups, similar situation. UTSA really is coming along after a slow start. They get North Texas today. We've got them covering 8.5 in all three projection models. Maybe our biggest projected edge, which kind of surprised me a little bit. Southern Miss to cover 3.5 against ULM. We're seeing some pretty significant edges in all three models on the Golden Eagles today. And to prove that I'm cold-hearted and will absolutely go against my personal interests, as I'm wearing my University of Hawaii Rainbow Warriors hoodie today, I've got Nevada covering 3.5. Nevada, excuse me, I mispronounced it. Covering 3.5 in all three models today. Hawaii on the road struggles a bit, and Nevada's really been looking good the last couple of weeks.
Wow, I don't think I ever would have guessed that Nevada would have been on the good end of the best bets segment here on this show this year, but interesting. Okay. All right, I've got all those in. Chris, what else should I add to my ticket here today?
I'm surprised Nick didn't hit any Ivies today.
So I was looking at that, and last night in the Campus2Canton Discord, the NIL betting channel, we did discuss or at least mention that we projected Princeton as the favorite at Dartmouth, and unfortunately that did not work out.
That was a brutal loss. Dartmouth kicks a field goal with like a minute 30 left. Princeton gets their field goal blocked to win the game.
Yeah,
that was tough, especially that Princeton came back. So I understand.
But I'm not seeing them. It just might be. Here we go. You talk. Maybe I'll be able to sneak one in.
All right. I got some off the wall ones today. Georgia Southern team total second half over 16.5. So I know what you're thinking. What the heck is probably the first thing. This Texas State team does not have depth, and their defense isn't very good. But they've been holding their opponents in the first half to pretty low scores. So last 4 weeks, Troy scores 7 in the first half, 24 in the second half. ULM scores 7 in the first half, 13 in the second half. ULL, 14 in the first half, 20 in the second half. Southern Miss, 10 in the first half, 26 in the second half. This defense gets worn down in the second half. Georgia Southern is a dog, which means that they're probably going to have to come back if that's what you believe, and that's what Vegas believes. I like the team total over for the second half for the Georgia Southern Eagles. So give me that. UTSA team total, I am with Nick on this game. I like UTSA here. I think North Texas has possibly the worst defense in the country, if not bottom 3. UTSA wants to score a lot of points, and they will run it up on you if they have the chance. They've done it every week they can. I like that you're getting it under 41 too. 41 is kind of a key number in terms of scoring. Arizona State plus 11.5 versus Utah. This Arizona State team is not very good, personnel wise, but they play hard as hell. They're tough. And I don't think Utah's really Utah's fine, and they're doing a lot with a limited group of players, I think, especially without their quarterback Cam Rising, who's done for the year. I like Arizona State as long as it stays under or over double digits. I think that they can compete enough. And then give me Notre Dame -3. Talked about it earlier. Clemson's missing a lot of starters. I like Notre Dame anyway before that news came out. Cade Klubnik is banged up too. He's wearing a sleeve on his leg. I like the Irish here. I think Clemson is they haven't quit. I don't think Dabo would let anybody quit. or he'd be off the team. But I like Notre Dame a lot.
All right, our Ivy League bet this week, we will go with Cornell Penn under 44.5.
That's a big number.
Around 41, a little bit of an edge there. Actually project a bigger edge in Yale Brown under 58.5, but me personally, I could see that game turning into a little bit of a back and forth and see a little more of a path to hit the over in that one. So I think Cornell Penn under 44.5 is what we'll do today.
I can get you 45.5.
I'll take it.
All right, I gotta wait for those lines to drop here, where I'm looking, and then I will be playing that for sure.
I like that call too. I think that's a good number.
All right, well, let's pick some games here. As we mentioned earlier, we've got a lot of ranked versus ranked games this week, and to do that, let's bring in Barnabas as well, our NFL draft guy, who's going to tell you some matchups he's looking at this week. Barnabas, how's it going? Do you have any response to Chris from earlier? I know you were listening, where he was taking some shots at your Terps there.
Yeah, no offense taken whatsoever. I'm really out on my Maryland team this year. You can't lose to both Northwestern and Illinois. That's just embarrassing. That was supposed to be the weak part of the schedule, and suddenly the team's just floundering. We all knew they would. Maryland does well in September every year. One of the safest bets in the world. And the reason why Maryland hasn't won 5 games in a row to start the season in a while is because there hasn't been 5 Saturdays to start the season in September. That's really the only reason. So no offense taken. They can win back my fandom later in the season, I guess.
All right. There we go. Well, let's get into these games here. We've got Kansas State at Texas, our first one here. Texas looks like 3.5, 4, depending on where you're looking. That one kicks off here at noon Eastern. And Barnabas, I'm just going to come right to you first here. What matchup are you looking for in this game? There's a lot of them, I think, quite frankly. They're interesting ones.
Yeah, let's talk about a Dane Brugler favorite here, Ben Sinnott. Not going to be a huge fantasy player at the next level, but he's definitely a guy that NFL teams will look at. He's going to be a better football player than he is a fantasy player. And I think his fantasy ceiling at the next level is kind of like a Kyle Juszczyk, so take that with a grain of salt. But he's probably matching up a little bit with Texas linebacker Jalen Ford, who leads the team in tackles. He's not necessarily one of the bigger guys. He's thicker, but he's not one of the bigger guys. And so, the Big 12 linebackers have made a living out in the NFL as well. So I expect Ben Sinnott, who kind of plays that like H-back role, will be matched up with him a lot. And we'll see, I'm interested to see Ben Sinnott's blocking, because if he's going to sell himself as an H-back, he's going to have to block pretty well.
All right, so there we go, watching for Ben Sinnott, and we did mention him earlier as a player that could be a start here for you today. All right, Nick, who are you picking in this game?
This is one that was very, very close to entering best bet territory. Just the numbers are high on Texas, and they're pretty low on K-State. But me personally, I mean, K-State has really, really played well recently. Texas, of course, has had the injury issue at the quarterback position. So my level of confidence is not super high, but all 3 projection models, 2 of the 3 see about a 2.5 or more point edge in this one. And one, the one that's barely on K-State to cover, it's close. So give me Texas.
All right, Chris.
So there's a flat 3 out there, I think, that I would bet personally. Yeah, I mean, I am also low in Kansas State, and a lot of that is because their roster strength numbers are never quite up to par. They're more of like a developmental program. But I like Texas here. I do. Kansas State's playing really well. They are, for sure. Some really good wins. I think they're a really good program. But Texas has to have this game. They really, really need it. I think they do it. I think what we saw last week from Malik Murphy is going to be a lot better this week. Full week of practice as the QB1, probably a little different scheme. I like the Longhorns today.
Matt?
Yeah, I agree with Chris and Nick. I think Texas takes it. I mean, Kansas State has a very good defense, but it seemed like the play calling last week for Sark was a little bit vanilla. Maybe that was just giving Malik Murphy a little bit more time to get used to this offense, but I think it's going to be a lot of Jonathan Brooks again, a lot of Cedric Baxter, Malik Murphy when they need it, but I think Texas is going to end up coming away with the win.
I'm going to pick Kansas State to win this game outright. I just think this Texas team with Murphy in there is incredibly one-dimensional. I think there's one thing you have to stop. You stop the run, they're going to really struggle to score points here. It's going to be a low-scoring game. I'm going to take Kansas State to win outright. Notre Dame at Clemson, and we did cover this one in the best bets here a little bit, so I think we know where Chris leans in this one. But we've got some injuries on the Clemson side. Injuries on both sides, quite frankly, piling up a little bit here this season. Barnabas, who are you watching in this matchup?
You know me, I can't turn down a trench matchup, right? And I've talked about Joe Alt a couple times this season. So let's go into the middle. Clemson's pretty stout up the middle, although I think Tyler Davis has like a questionable tag on him. So I don't know how that's going. I'm really disappointed Felix isn't around because I'd love to see him pronounce his name, but Ruke Orororo for Clemson. The Clemson's always stout up the middle. They pride themselves on their defensive line. You can see all the Clemson defensive linemen in the NFL. So those two are going up against the interior for Notre Dame and Rocco Spindler, Pat Coogan, who aren't really on major draft radars yet. They should be maybe. They're Notre Dame offensive linemen. Obviously, they develop and recruit really well in that unit, and so they'll be draft eligible and they'll be drafted. But it'll be interesting to see how they go up against maybe a hobbled Tyler Davis and that Clemson front that's as we mentioned shaken up a little bit.
All right, well, Chris, like we said, we know your lean on this game already. Nick, what are you looking at?
So I see a pretty big edge in Notre Dame on this one. And I think that with the news sort of trickling out earlier this morning about how severely limited Clemson is, especially in the secondary, probably would be a little bit bigger than the numbers might even suggest on the Notre Dame side.
Matt?
First off, your boy Caden Hauser starting today for the Michigan State Spartans. Big news. We're expecting a big day from Hauser. I'm taking Notre Dame. Clemson beat up. I don't even think. I agree with Chris. They haven't quit. They won't quit on Dabo, but this team is just beaten up. They're just not a good team this year. I'm taking Notre Dame.
I'm going to take Notre Dame too here. I wish that total was a little bit higher, but obviously that's how, not how betting works. Because who the heck is going to score for either of these teams today outside of Estime, man? It's getting bad out there. All right, Oklahoma.
Alt 45. If you want to get into the alt market there, you probably got to pay a little juice, like probably 120, but I don't think that's bad.
Yeah, I'll see what I can find here. Maybe
that's on the station.
Parlay there. Maybe I'll do like a Notre Dame money line and slightly higher total there. All right, Oklahoma at Oklahoma State. We previewed this game earlier. This is one of the more fun games on the schedule. As we mentioned, the last time that this rivalry, at least for as of today, is scheduled to be played. They've been playing for, since the beginning of football, basically, at both of those programs. Oklahoma is a 5-point favorite. As Chris mentioned, that number has been inching toward Oklahoma State a little bit here in the past 24 hours or so. Barnabas, you've got some names I actually recognize on here, so that's pretty cool. Who are we watching this game?
Yeah, so we've talked about Ollie Gordon. What more is there to say? He's probably going to get drafted as a production profile kind of guy, not necessarily like all the NFL Jews, probably an early day 3 type guy. But I want to talk about the freshman, right? Peyton Bowen, the safety, was one of the big NIL guys this past signing period. And he's done pretty well for himself, in that Oklahoma secondary. Notably, also, Oklahoma's leading tackler, linebacker Trustman, is out or questionable today, so keep that in mind as well. But another name that I'm watching for, he's not the first out of the tunnel, he's not necessarily the first on the field either, but a name that you might recognize is Adebore. That's Tommy Adebore's younger brother, Adepoju. And he credits a big part of his recruiting process to his older brother. So I want to see whether he has the same juice as his older brother did. I doubt he gets the same 40 time because that 40 time was just absolutely bonkers. But he's supposed to be the better player than his older brother. So I want to see some good hands work there.
Yeah, I've consistently seen him labeled as better than his brother. So that'll be interesting to watch there. Nick, back to the game here. Oklahoma State, 5 points. What you betting that?
Well, so if I trust the projections, and so I do tend to try to do that. Otherwise, what's the point of doing it all? Oklahoma is favored by at least nearly 7.5 in all three projection models. So do see a very, very significant edge there. The talent edge profile or the talent profile on the whole, Oklahoma has a significant edge. But going on the road in a very, very harsh environment, my personal opinion and some of the things that I can't quantify with our projections definitely make it so that I'm not as confident as the numbers may suggest.
Chris?
Yeah, I talked about this game earlier a little bit. Yeah, Strusman's out, the linebacker. That's a big loss. I like Oklahoma here. I just think you're buying the dip on Oklahoma and selling Oklahoma State high. Essentially, is kind of how I view it. Yeah, I know it's Bedlam. I know it's at Oklahoma State. They will storm the field if they win. I'm very, very confident about that.
I'm pretty sure they're going to burn the stadium down if they win. I mean, let's not undersell what the actions here of that crowd after they win this game.
Yeah, they might. Yeah, I like Oklahoma. I really wanted to make it one of my bets on the day. I really, really did. But I really would like it at 4. So I like Oklahoma here, just not like that confident.
Matt?
Yeah, I'm taking Oklahoma as well, but I do think this is going to be a very close game. We talked about earlier in the show, like Nick was saying, there's just a lot that goes in this game that you can't factor in. I think the possible last bedlam ever at Oklahoma State, they're going to come out jacked up, ready to go. I think it's going to be a very close game, but I'm going to take Oklahoma to win.
I'm with you. I'm taking Oklahoma here as well. Missouri at number 1 Georgia. One of the tougher games remaining here on Georgia's schedule. Missouri been a little better than we anticipated them being this season. Barnabas, draft matchup here in this one. We got you back in the trenches here a little bit here, huh?
Yeah, I can't pass it up. If I'm Georgia, right, I've talked about Missouri's corners. That's the strength of their defense, right? And so if I'm Georgia, I'm going to try to run over Missouri, just, steamroll them. And so, Georgia's offensive line, maybe not as beefy as it usually is, maybe not over 1,700 pounds across the offensive line. So, a little bit of a different year, but they have a guy that some predicted would come out last year in Cedric Van Pran, who's playing center for them. The wrong SVP, as Jared likes to refer to him as, he's a solid guy, more of a technician than just a brawn type of run over you type of guy that we're used to from Georgia. Your Steelers, Austin, are finally starting their Georgia offensive linemen, right? So a little bit of a different flavor. He's probably going to meet up with Missouri linebacker Tyron Hopper a lot. Hopper's leading the team in tackles, and he's kind of that same type of Rodriguez and the linebacker for the Lions, right? That type of speed, kind of in space type linebacker. And so we're seeing a little bit of a technician versus more of a team leader type glue guy, if you will. Not necessarily the most athletically gifted, but and maybe a little bit light. But both these guys will be on NFL rosters at some point. But SVP, as Jared likes to refer to him, is probably going to get drafted a little bit higher. But if I'm Georgia, that's the matchup I'm looking to win because I don't want to go up against these Missouri corners if I don't really have to.
Former Florida Gator, I believe, transferred over there. That guy looked like he was 40 in high school. I remember watching a little bit of him. Nick, the line 14.5 right now, Georgia favored. Over kind of that magic number of 14. Is that too much?
So that is just the way we calculate things. 14.5 in a conference game against a Missouri team that, they're definitely in a different tier, maybe a couple of tiers when you talk about just raw talent numbers. However, Missouri has played very, very well. They have been able to add to those raw talent numbers the way we calculate things with a lot of production. So their roster strength numbers have increased. They're a top 25 roster right now, top 20, I think, actually. So our numbers just can't get to 14.5 in this in this matchup. Do have Missouri projected to cover in all three. But one thing that I've been looking at pretty seriously, and I'm shaking a little bit because last week Georgia really, really looked good against Florida, especially sort of the middle 45 minutes. Is probably the best we've seen Georgia look so far this year. Looked much closer to what they have been the last couple of seasons. But I almost threw on a best bet. DraftKings has some regular season win totals, and I kind of want to go Georgia under 11.5 at plus 115. I just think there's a really, really good chance that we're going to see Georgia slip up. Is it Missouri? Is it Ole Miss? Is it Tennessee? That's a pretty tough 3-week stretch, and this, in my opinion, is a losable game for Georgia. So we're on Missouri.
Matt?
Nick talked me into it. I'm taking Missouri. I was going to take Georgia, but we're all in, baby. Luther Burden, historic day. Let's go Tigers. Let's go. Taking Missouri.
Chris?
I like Georgia. I just think this is the matchup where they come out and dominate. Missouri, really? Missouri? You think they're going to hang with Georgia? Because I don't.
Hey, they did last year.
This is their 6-6 game?
Yeah.
All right, I'm taking Georgia here as well. Washington at USC. USC fading a little bit here recently, but Washington hasn't been great either. Washington a 3-point favorite. That game kicks off 7:30 Eastern. Barnabas, you're looking for Michael Penix here today?
Yeah, it's more about USC's defense because we already mentioned how they're allergic to tackling. And I had a little bit of a rant about lefty quarterbacks on Twitter a couple of days ago, and so there's that. But 3 out of the 4 top leading tacklers for USC are safeties, which tells you all you need to know about USC's defense. But I'm looking at their leading tackler, Jalen Smith, who's probably not a real NFL guy, and Kalen Bullock, who is a draft darling a little bit at 6'3". So I'd like to see a pass breakup or two. They don't actually have that many passes defended on the stat sheet, and so I'd like to see a pass breakup or two between the safeties because Michael Penix is just going to tear them up. It's mostly Kalen DeBoer, let's be honest here, right? That's going to tear up this defense, and so I just want to see some sort of life out of this defense, and it's going to come from the safeties.
All right, Nick, USC or Washington here?
I've got USC favored, and I do not feel good about it.
There we go, Chris.
I like USC. I think Washington's a little bit fraudulent.
I agree Washington's fraudulent, but that pass defense is very good. I think they're going to get to Caleb Williams a little bit, and I like the offense and Kalen DeBoer being able to score with the ball last. I'm taking Washington.
The guy with the Huskies shirt there probably shouldn't have been the best source of an opinion
Best
here
game
on
of the
this matter.
day. Best game of the day.
I'm rooting for USC because I want Oregon to kind of shift into that lead pole there position there. Last
We're
one
under 78, by the way.
There you go. LSU at Alabama. Last game here, 14-8. Alabama 3-point favorite. Barnabas, just toss some names out here for us that we should be watching here today.
Yeah, so Mekhi Wingo is out for LSU, and J.C. Latham was seen in a boot. So I'm looking at Mason Smith, the defensive tackle for LSU, versus Seth McLaughlin.
All right, Nick.
I see no edge in this. Have Alabama favored, but LSU to cover right around 2.5 to 3.
Chris?
I like the Tide today.
Matt?
Same. I think LSU's defense is overrated. Alabama's going to win.
I'll take Bama as well. All right. Thank you guys for hopping on here with us today. Good luck to everybody out there. Hopefully this is the slate lives up to what we expect it to be. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Tailgate, getting ready for all the games across college football. Until next time, guys, thanks for tuning in.